Hey, how's everybody doing? It's Derek from Derek's Vlog. Yeah, so I told you guys that I would do a vlog about my Hurricane Katrina experience, so that's what I'm doing now. Sorry about my voice. I've been getting over a cold. I still kind of have it. Chest colds and kind of sucks. But so I guess I'll tell you about my experience. It was for about 4 years now. It's 2005, so it's been about 4 years. I used to live in New Orleans. I was actually born in New Orleans, and I grew up in Massachusetts. And I decided that I really wasn't doing anything with my life, and I decided that I really wanted to go back to New Orleans when I was about 20 years old, and I wanted to go back to New Orleans. And so I got in my car and I drove to New Orleans, and I got a lot of really good experience down there. Met a lot of really amazing people, ate a lot of amazing food, and partied my ass off. But my life was kind of going downhill for a little while down there because I got caught up in the whole small town kid in the big city kind of fever. But I was living with my grandmother at the time, and I was drinking a lot and doing a lot of things that I really shouldn't have been doing. And I remember it was like 2 nights. Well, before that, that year, there were a lot of hurricane warnings, and a lot of people just felt like every time they would say, give us a hurricane warning, they're like, oh, it's just gonna pass, it's no worries. So like two nights before the hurricane actually hit, they were kind of predicting it on the TV and stuff, and saying, the big hurricane's coming, and if it hits, it's going to be horrible, and this and that. And I remember seeing it in I was sitting in a diner and I was watching the news, and I saw that there was a hurricane coming, and so I was just immediately, it better hit, because if it doesn't, then it's going to be just another disappointment, and I guess there was a part of me that felt like, it'd be exciting to see something like that. I guess you never really imagine how bad it could be. But I originally was going to leave with my friend, and my grandmother decided she didn't want to leave, so I decided to stay with her. The night before the hurricane hit, my mom had actually called me and said, your grandmother's staying, you really need to stay. And I was planning on going to Texas with my friend. And because I didn't go, my friend decided to stay also. But, I had invited him to come and stay with me at my aunt's house in Mid-City, and he said no, he's going to stay with his dog in his house. Anyway, so I ended up, we drove to my aunt's apartment building, and she lived in a huge apartment building, and we stayed there during the hurricane. And that night, there were just tons of people there. Hundreds of people, and everybody ended up, kind of, we blocked off all the windows and everything, and we all kind of bunkered down. It was a little party, everybody had their, full tanks of gas and all their food and water and all this. And I remember when it began to hit, and we were listening to the radio, and they said, yeah, it's hitting New Orleans. It's going to hit New Orleans. And I remember listening to the radio and thinking to myself, like, I can't believe we're here. Like, this is going to be really bad. And, it was still a part of me that was a little excited also. But, anyway, so the wind was indescribable. I remember at one point we had gone outside to see, to kind of watch the storm, coming, and it got to a point where we couldn't stand outside anymore. It got so strong that literally, if you were outside, the wind would just take you away. It would just pick you up and take you away. And from the window, we literally watched trees being pulled up and cars being moved from one end of the road all the way to the other end of the road, and signs flying in the air, and just it was incredible. And at one point during the height of the storm, the wind was so deep that it literally looked like a ghost or a monster the size of 100 trains just running through the in between the buildings down the streets, and it was fucking scary as hell. But the next morning we all woke up, and we went outside, and it wasn't that bad. I mean, the destruction was incredible, but there wasn't a whole lot of water. Maybe a foot or so of water, but that wasn't too bad. But I mean, when you look at all the trees down and the buildings, just whole sides of buildings just torn away, and huge buildings too, not just little ones, but huge buildings just destroyed. It was scary. And I remember we were still listening to the radio at that point, and they were saying that that the storm had hit and the destruction and all this, and that they were hoping that the water would reside soon, and that we'd all be able to kind of go and start the cleanup. And I remember a couple hours had passed, and my grandmother, we had gone outside. I looked at my grandmother. I said, "I think the water's getting higher." And she's like, "No, it's just your imagination." So I went out with a marker and I drew a line on the pavement where the water was. And I went about an hour later, and the line was gone. It was underwater, and the water was rising. Now, it wasn't like this huge wave of water where I was. It was like a slow rise, but probably within 5 hours, the water had risen so high that my car was completely gone. I had parked on the side of the building, and after the storm had hit, the water had risen about to where my tire level was, and by the time the water was finished rising, it was completely, my car was disappeared. And at one point, I had swum out to my car, and I stood on the roof, and the water was up to my knees. So just kind of imagine that as being how high the water was. So the first couple days, we just kind of sat and waited until finally the radio stopped playing. And at one point, they were talking about on the radio, they were like, well, we're going to send in cruise ships to come get you guys and all this. And, so we waited and waited, and nothing. 2 days gone by, nothing. So finally, I told my grandmother, I said, I'm gonna go and get help. So, I got a little bucket that, floated on the water, and I put my backpack in it with the things that I had gotten out of my house. And I put it in the bucket, and I floated it, and I swam alongside it. And I probably swam for about a mile or so, and I found a bayou, a strip of land where there were people gathered. And they had said that there were helicopters coming to get people. So the only problem was that I really didn't have a way to get back, because when I got in there, someone had stolen the bucket that I floated my backpack on, and I didn't want to get my backpack wet. So I waited, and finally, as luck arrived, I found a boat, and I took the boat, and I swam back to the apartment to get my grandmother and my aunt out. And when I got there, they were gone. They had gotten rescued.